The boroughs are New York City. The burbs are everywhere else. Real estate is the ultimate game of risk and reward. It's the biggest investment most people ever make. Fortunes are made over a lifetime and lost in a day. And we're not playing with monopoly money. How do you stay ahead? Who's buying? Who's selling? And why? What do they know? We want the truth. You need an edge. Boroughs and Burbs is your secret weapon, giving you the insider knowledge and strategies you need to succeed in the high-stakes world of real estate. From Palm Beach to Palm Springs, Manhattan to Malibu, we press the experts to expose the pain, find the deals, and occasionally predict the future. That's Boroughs and Burbs, Thursdays, 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific. Because everyone can make money in real estate.
Welcome everybody, Boroughs and Burbs, number 195. Today, development planning and design. We've got Benjamin Watson back from Houston. Say hello, Benjamin.
Hello, everyone.
Good to have you. And
thank you for asking me back.
But last time we talked more about Houston. I think today we said we want to talk more about the development side. And so you put the show together with expert Vincent Yan. Why don't you tell us why? Who's Vincent?
Well, sure. Well, I can let Vincent introduce himself, but Vincent and I are both at Douglas Elliman Development Marketing. He happens to be based in New York. I, of course, am based in Texas, but we work together extensively on ground-up construction projects throughout the state, particularly the branded residential projects. Many of them, we have coming to market. We actually just launched one last week, the St. Regis Houston, which is getting tremendous response and feedback from the market. In fact, just a couple, recently, our pre-sales, even before opening the sales gallery, allowed for the construction loan to already have been approved and received. So we're quite proud of that. Vince and I worked on that project. It's been almost 2 years, Vince, before launching.
Yep.
And I think for those interested in new development, it showcases how early in the process brokerages that have a new development division become involved. We like to get involved even before the developer buys the piece of land. In some cases, our clients ask us, should we proceed with this piece of property, and what do you think would be the highest and best use? And we lean heavily on Vince and his team, licensed architects that come from various backgrounds, along with our research division. We happen to have a research department in New York as well as in Houston that covers the Western region. And we use this data to guide developers into what type of product they should build, or if it's a branded residential, how do you make it specific for your market in terms of unit sizing, the unit mix. And Vince and his team specifically have an extensive catalog of benchmarking that becomes incredibly useful and valuable to our developers and their architects. Vince, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Hold on, before you do, that's exactly what I was looking for.
The
client calls you up because you're on the agency side, you're the agent, and then you call on Vincent, who's not an agent, but runs the in-house team, design and development specialists. That's
Correct.
what I'm hearing.
Vince and I were both licensed, but we don't practice as agents. I have a development background, and now just work with Douglas Elliman for our developer clients. But my background as an agent and understanding sales is obviously immensely helpful in that process. But yes, when we engage a new client, we always bring in, Vince is usually with us in the pitches, right? We promote heavily our planning and design pillars of service, because it's a really unique offering that only a few select brokerages happen to have and offer.
Okay. So Vincent, now why don't you, now we'll let Vincent tell us about Vincent.
Well, it was a great introduction, Ben, and I appreciate that. Yeah, Vincent Yan, Vice President of Planning Design for Douglas Elliman Development Marketing. I've been here for almost 9 years now, and we're based in New York. And I started in New York, just learning the ropes and doing a lot of the projects there. But as you know, our second market, Florida, is a big market. And then recently, as we expanded to Texas, I kind of expanded my services and let down a hand to Ben. So yeah, we're a team of 5. Like, it's a very small team. We all have architectural backgrounds. Some of them are licensed architects. Our head, the head person of our department, Tiffany Way, she's the senior vice president of planning design. She has a licensed architect. But yeah, with a team of 5 of us, we're currently working on a pipeline of almost 2 to 3 billion billion portfolio in a pipeline that would be launched almost in 2 to 3 years. And yeah, so that's kind of but Ben already kind of gave you a really good introduction of our kind of services, but I'm also happy to kind of go in detail of what that means as well.
Vincent, that 200 billion is broken into about how many projects?
2 to 3 billion.
Oh, good question. Yeah.
I wish it was 200 billion, but
it's a good mix of well, first of all, regionally, that's primarily coming right now from Florida. So a lot of our new dev projects is actually coming from Florida, and a lot of it is actually branded residence projects. And I would say we have about between 10, 15 new dev projects in the pipeline right now. So quite a lot. And again, most of it coming from Florida.
we're trying to catch up in Texas.
And then that's it. Yeah.
Just curious, is the approach in New York unique to the other two, or is it a similar template when you take a project on?
That's a good question. I would say it's a very different cities call for different things, which I'm happy to explain a little bit more in detail in terms of our approach. But for the most part, given how sophisticated these, like the markets where, if I'm answering your question correctly, like New York and Florida, because they're so sophisticated already, they kind of have this higher expectations of what they want from the project versus like from a market like Texas, where they don't really know who we are and what we do. And I think that's
Wild West.
Yeah. So it's a learning process for them to know who we are. But for like a city like New York, which again is so competitive, so highly saturated, they are kind of expect that like this is kind of the type of services we want from, especially coming from the developers when they approach us. Like, this is what we already want from you guys. Like, please provide us this data, basically.
And maybe to jump in and offer a point of clarification. So Vince and his team work with the project architects. Our planning and design department, along with sales, we look at a product and how do we achieve highest price per square foot, how to achieve the absorption schedule that is what the client needs, the developer, their investment partners. But we're only, Vince and his team are not drawing the building per se and like designing it. We hire world-renowned architects, and often Vince will recommend like what architect to pair with what interior team. But it's all, Vince, and correct me if this is the right way to phrase it, it's from a consulting standpoint, would you say?
Yep. Correct. Yep. So like we're the ones who easily to say that we provide the architectural programming to the development process. That's so like if we're starting from the beginning of like highlighting like what we do, like imagine like you guys kind of talked with Leon in the previous podcast where a developer approaches us, they have this project site and they want to build a new development or a new condominium, luxury condominium. So Leon will provide what I like to call the quantitative data, meaning, all right, here are the numbers for the market comp. Is this project feasible, right? So if the developers and the agents that we work with say, yeah, like it looks like given the market, we can actually achieve this target pricing, then this is where we come in. It's like, okay, well, the next question is like, how do we build this project to achieve those numbers? And that's where we come in. We provide what I like to call the qualitative data, saying, okay, from this beginning, like you guys need to do this X, Y, and Z because that's what we're seeing in the market, and that's what you guys need to basically build to achieve these similar pricing, right? Because like most of the time, if we weren't there, the architect are going to be like, well, we're just going to design what we feel is or whatever to their kind of design principles or whatnot. But we're providing them that kind of market guidance and that market insight to say like, this is what if we're achieving this price per square foot, and these are the target demographic that we're selling to. Well, here are the architectural expectations that we need to build to so that we could achieve those pricing. So that's kind of like the really overall summary of what we do in P&D for the developers and also for our broker teams.
And just to add to that, I think what we're finding, obviously, construction costs are increasing nationwide, and Texas traditionally has geared towards larger units, which has made condo development difficult. But what's beneficial about Vince having a national perspective is we're able to take certain projects in, say, a market like Florida that's not as efficient as, like, say, a market like New York City, but yet has become more right sized so that developers can get their price per square foot goals. But yet the programming of someone buying, say, a $5 to $10 million apartment exists. Like, what is that person? What are their must-haves to consider even purchasing, or they would, walk away, right? So that's been really beneficial in Texas as this market continues to evolve. We're able to take maybe a comparison project in somewhere else and say, this could translate to, say, Dallas or Houston or Austin. And it's helpful it's pretty much the only way that, projects, I think, can get built kind of in this new environment, as we're, needing to have that higher price per square foot across the blend. So it's a really, useful, I think, aspect of, again, having planning and design that covers a national portfolio.
So one of the questions we sent in advance was, at what stage do you get involved? And it occurs to me when you're talking that many times they've identified an opportunity, a piece of land, and they know what they can acquire the land for. And let's say they can acquire the land for, pick a number, $50 million. And they say, okay, therefore, I think I want to build a 20-story tower, 100 units. And I think, that the math, so they come to you with a piece of land and a spreadsheet. And then do you then say, okay, if you want to achieve a $1,500 per foot, according to your pencil, these are the design considerations? Or do you, before they even acquire the land, help them target what they should be spending on land?
So both, actually. So most of the time, we've been approached with the developer. They already have the project in hand, or a building that they might want to just demolish and whatnot. But most of the time, we come in, and most optimally, we come in during the beginning where they do own the site, right? And that's when they kind of come to us and do this feasibility study. This is where they kind of approach the research team first to provide that market data. We give them like, okay, here are the comp sets, and this is what we can achieve, what you guys could potentially achieve. Now you can take that price per square foot, like this, not hypothetical, but like this, what we feel like it may sell for. You can just take that back and do the pro forma. So we're not doing the pro forma for them. We're giving them the number to say like, yes, we can sell it for this price. You tell us whether you guys want to continue that project. Now, on the other hand, we have been approached by developers where they haven't even bought the site, but they want to do the feasibility study with us before they go in and start bidding on the site. So I've had that situation maybe 2 weeks ago where I'm on the phone with the broker and they're on the phone with the developer, and like they were like, what's the price, and can the layout work? And then I'm kind of like doing all the stuff that I could explain later, but we're just doing all these feasibility studies in the background to say, yeah, I think this could work. You can bid on the site, right? We can tell like, yeah, this is a feasible project.
And to jump in on that, so what we typically ask for is like, in your pro forma, what is the total like sellable square footage? And like, let's say they're like, it's 180,000. So from that number with Vince and Leon, we will create kind of draft V1 unit mix. Like, okay, given this location, we think this is your target demographic. And then from that target demographic, this is like the benchmarks or the depth of wealth, right? And we will provide, depending on the relationship with the client, like, a first pass unit mix with like Schedule A pricing. And to Vince's comment, yes, we help them in some cases decide if they should purchase a property, or if they've purchased it, it's like the beginning stages of what it could be. And in another situation, Vince and I were on a call and we recommended that they not purchase the property because it wasn't in their best interest, So it's all sorts of scenarios. People will come to us and ask us to sign an NDA, or sometimes they issue out an RFP to various brokerages in the market, and we choose to respond or not, right? So
Scott Hobbs is a well-known luxury builder in both New York, the Hamptons, a lot of the markets, that we tackle on this show. I want to get Scott's help here. It occurs to me that when he's building one of these large projects, the designer comes in and says, this is what it's going to cost to do this design. And a lot of times the client turns to the designer and to the builder and says, how can you help me manage to these costs? I don't want my costs getting out of hand. So Scott, I mean, at what point and how much responsibility does the builder take, or the design team, which is being influenced by Vince?
Well, it's kind of a different business. So in the development side, I mean, ultimately it's money, and it comes down to what's an ROI and what's a return. Now there's ego involved, and there's people who have different concepts of the vision of what will sell and for how much. In which case, again, it's very helpful to have realistic advisors who assist and take some of that emotion out. On the custom residential side, ultimately we're building something for somebody, and it's something they want. And if they have the money, then they probably ought to pay to get what they want. And they've hired very talented architects in order to help pull that vision and create something very special. On a money producing, an income producing, or a project that has to have a financial return, you take a different perspective. And that's where having different parties together trying to make it so the equation works just becomes so important. And again, it's really important to have good advisors who can help negotiate and figure out what's real between design wants and what contractors say the construction reality is.
Yeah, I'd love to be in Scott's business. We really don't. I'm a high-rise guy, but yet Vince has helped our team. Like, we've done townhome, we can do that type of product, and we do. But typically we're not doing like a single family build, right? Like, we need that doesn't generate enough profit to really make sense for like our division. We need multiple, like if we're doing like a single family home development, typically our projects are 50 million and above to be considered, at least in Texas. I don't know what the Florida or New York requirements are.
You've built a $50 million house, right, Scott?
It would not rent out to sort of pay the bills for what it costs, though. So it's not really got a good it's got an amazing emotional ROI, not necessarily the best financial ROI.
Yeah, I really focus, and I believe in like it's condo specifically, not kind of the large single family home, but it is interesting. I mean, we are seeing, I mean, that is a business line in at least Texas, and definitely I think in LA, that planning and design could consult on. But one of the things that's most valuable is our benchmarking. And so we would have to build up that library of benchmarking to really add value to someone like Scott,
Well, and it would be problematic because so many of our things are honest to God unique. I mean, they're truly one of a kind, whereas
That's correct. Exactly.
you guys want to try to take some of that out, because otherwise, trying to prototype every single financial model just doesn't, that's hard.
Yeah, we're designing like units that run up a stack, so it's more about efficiency, but yet still bringing that, luxury aspect. So
Sure.
Can we talk about planning in the sense of like projection of unit mix? Because you start a project, Vince, you get involved. That project's not going to be livable for 5 years, plausibly, right? And we go through cycles.
Sometimes it's longer.
Yeah, but we go through cycles where we need family sized apartments. We need more 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms. And those cycles come and go. What tools do you use to kind of project 5 years in advance to understand what that unit mix is going to be? And have you designed something where, you know, after a year or 2 in, you say, we need to pivot because this is changing?
So I'll answer the second question. I think Ben can also interject for the first question. So it's a very good question because like that's one of the thing that we help developers be risk averse because like you said, the market changes all the time, right? So how do we, when we provide them a unit mix, how do we become flexible on the plan, right? And so that's where kind of one of our knowledge comes in is like, okay, well, here's a recommended unit mix, right? Here's, for example, here's a floor plate, and we're doing these efficient 1s and 2s right now, okay? And so I'm laying out, you know, on the floor plate, telling the architect like, okay, well, given, you know, these specific view quarters, I think for this 2-bedroom, it would get the most, you know, attractive price when we launch sales. However, if we do need to pivot, then if we want like later on, we need to see more 3-bedrooms or larger, then we have already thought about, okay, given these like adjacent units with this 1 and 2, you can easily combine them by knocking a wall down. So like, that's one of the questions, like, or one of the things that we can help developers like, okay, you don't have to go and change all and move all these wet walls and stuff like that, because as you know, that's almost impossible, or it's a very costly change. But we think about it that like, okay, if it does if the market flips, then it's an easy change by just knocking a wall down, and then that itself would be like, here's a larger living room now for a 3-bedroom and so forth. And so we're carefully planning that, and then that's one of the importance of like providing that kind of pre-planning services so that we're avoiding those costly mistakes. Now, to answer your first question, I mean, we try our best. Like we're working with brokers like you guys, right, to tell us you guys are telling us in the future too what you're seeing in the market, right? When we're, for example, when we're working on a project in like Tribeca or downtown, you guys are experts in the market. You're seeing kind of these trends to see what's going. So you're telling us, okay, well, for now, if we're going to launch a project in 2 years, we're seeing we can launch it with much more efficiency of 1 bedroom to 2. However, Vince, but I'm seeing a lot of families that might be moving in. I think we should also plan for that. And so collaboratively, we'll work that through that way, basically, right? And so it's hard to, you know, the market data can tell us so much, but then, you know, working with you guys who have, you know, boots on the ground information to tell us like what we're seeing in the market or seeing what's on the ground, it's very helpful to kind of really fine tune that unit mix. But then also with our collaboration, like we can be really flexible and risk averse for the developers.
But for something that's so rigid, then you actually are building in some level of flexibility.
Correct.
Combinations.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So we premeditate combination units in case, like what Bayer says, like we want a 3 or 4-bedroom. In case if we had built too many studios, well, we have. Yes, it's all built, but guess what? The easy change to combine those would just be knocking a wall down instead of trying to move a bathroom so you could be an ensuite bathroom or something like that. No, we would premeditate all of that so that it's a very I would say cheaper to make that modification than trying to move and change all these different walls and wet walls and so forth. So yeah.
And I would say in Texas, part of our sales process, many projects begin an LOI sales phase where it's a non-binding contract, but a refundable, you know, reservation. And that's useful in gauging, you know, demand. Like, are we seeing demand for that 1-bedroom category, or should we eliminate it and just go back to maybe more 2s? Like but in many cases, like we might conduct a market study or survey and engage further outside broker opinion, depending on the complexity of the project. So we try to, as Vince kind of hinted at, get as much information as possible in the early stages so that any changes will have least amount of financial impact from a design revision, you know.
We've had Steve Kligerman on the show a bunch of times.
Sure.
And most
Steve's
recently,
great.
I'll just pull him up. I'm just noticing now, he was on episode 39. What's the price of new in New York? He came back for who's hot, who's not, and then Manhattan's new development. I remember distinctly, you know, looking at Billionaires Row in New York with Stephen Kligerman, and he said, this one got it right, and it sold out at a profit, and this one, and this one, and this one. but not so much this one and this one. And I don't want to point the finger at particular projects, but it gets back to this question of accountability. What went wrong with those projects that didn't sell out right away? Did they just not listen to the advice? Did the market tastes change so much? Did they start off with a risky development and they knew it? I mean, what's
Well,
the difference between the winners and losers on Billionaires Row?
Yeah.
Vince, I mean, if you want to speak to Billionaires Row, sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of factors to that, right? It could be coming maybe bad timing in the market, or maybe that they have overshot their unit mix, or maybe the layouts have changed. Like I remember there was an occasion where we did a takeover. The project was already built, and they asked us to like, well, what went wrong, right? And so we said, well, here's X, Y, and Z. But coming from my department, we looked at some of the floor plans and said, okay, yeah, there are some obvious reasons. And this is when we're working with a broker, and because they're the ones who like know what the buyer wants for this specific building. And I'm not gonna name the building just to be, not, yeah. So they kind of told us like, okay, can we make these changes? And that's where they kind of enlisted our services to say, well, help us do this, right? Can we move some of these, or can we make this bedroom bigger? Because I feel like that's where we missed the mark on here, right? So like maybe why they didn't sell was because, yeah, maybe they were lacking in some of these like residential features that wasn't programmed from the beginning. And so that's why, going back to what Ben alluded to, is like that pre-planning and all that in the beginning is so crucial, because we're trying to avoid all of that. And there's many times where we have done these takeovers and we were looking at just from a floor plan's perspective, it was just kind of missing the mark. And that's where we kind of come in and say like, okay, given that this is already built and it's, we're not going to move these walls or these like wet rooms and so forth, but given these minor movements or in the walls, we can already improve some of these spaces. And that already itself would improve the layout so much more that it could be much more marketable to what the market buyer wants, right? So yeah.
How often is it just too ambitious of a price?
Very often.
Okay.
Very often. But then coming from our side, like we're gonna stand by it, we're gonna support it. And when we present them data to say like, okay, given these comps, you have X, Y, and Z. They're putting these types of appliances, they're putting in terms of these finishes. Now, if you want to achieve this pricing, you need to go above and beyond that, because we feel like, we're not trying to meet the market. Like, for us, DEDM is always saying like, we want to create the market. And so even though what we're seeing is like, okay, for example, we're seeing like, everyone is applying, using porcelain finishes in their kitchens and their bathrooms. Well, if we want to go above and beyond, let's provide quartz or marble, right? And so that's kind of the level of data and the kind of recommendation we tell developers that like, yeah, these aspirational pricing should also equate to aspirational design. And so that's kind of, there's that lack of, sometimes if we're not there, then I think there's not that disconnect, because sometimes to a developer, to them, they just want to do something very cheap and achieve that really big margin, right? But they don't understand that to get there, you got to pay money, or you got to pay to make that money, right? So that's kind of what we like along the lines to tell developers to do that. But sometimes it's a very tug and war kind of thing where like, well, I want to save money here, but we're telling them like, well, if you don't do that, then there's a risk that maybe that it's not going to meet our buyer pool. So yeah, that's that little level of kind of conversations and process that we work with the developers.
So one of the questions was trends. How's the amenity mix or
Oh.
design preferences changing? I would think that COVID probably made a massive shift in what
Sure.
was important to people, and that translated to amenities, but wasn't immediately obvious to us.
No. Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll speak for the residential amenities level. So as COVID happened, a lot of our projects at the time that were in the pipeline or the pre-planning phases, we had already switched to like looking at one bedrooms that we started to have to add dens to it. And in terms of amenities, like then we were talking about, from the work from home. So like lounges that could accommodate that work from home spaces. We're still seeing that today. I mean, because like there is that, there are some levels of people that do want to work from home. So it depends, or it also depends on the market too. But for the most part, when we're asked to say like, okay, well, what kind of levels or what kind of amenities should we provide? We'll say, well, we like to, provide a lounge, but that lounge should be multi-purposeful, that it should accommodate like a work from home space and so forth. And so that kind of was the trend that hit after COVID, but now what we're seeing here in today's trend is that the wellness component. So like the spa
huge.
component is huge, right? Because like it's not just like your conventional like your spa and sauna, but now there's like a hammam or an infrared sauna or a hydrotherapy suite. And so that has been a very big, thing that we've been trying to program in a lot of our spaces, and especially St. Regis. Like if when you're able to see that, or when they release some of that, you'll see that the programming we've made the wellness such a robust programming than most of the other spaces. Is just because like that's what we saw and we saw in other markets, and we wanted to bring that into the Texas market.
Yeah,
but
it's funny. I mean, during COVID, like we were programming to, a lot of like co-working spaces with phone booths, and
yeah,
that's kind of phasing out a little bit. But as Vince commented, wellness is really front and center, especially on the higher end. It's, and it goes into programming and it goes into services. Like, are you doing red light therapy? Are you, like saltwater? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. St. Regis has 40,000 square feet of amenities in Texas, and it actually has a spa, and it's branded residential only, so there's no hotel. But what's incredibly useful for our team is that our planning and design department has done extensive benchmarking. So we have this massive list of amenities, again, on a national, in some cases, then international level. And it allows you to see, okay, what is the existing local comp set providing? And then how can we expand on that? As I mentioned before, are there parallels from other markets that haven't been brought? In my case, Texas, right? And how can we be first to market or differentiate ourselves?
How about shared amenities versus private amenities? And it occurs to me that just because it worked in Houston, it may not, the lifestyle is different in New York and it may not work in New York.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, you have to know your market. And I think to Vince's earlier comment, that's where we lean in on our agents, their local expertise. Uh, I live in Houston, and of course I cover the state. So it's many of our buyers are selling a 15,000 square foot house. You know, what do we need to understand? What are their requirements coming from their single family home as they go to a lock and leave environment, because they're looking for, that type of lifestyle. So it goes into the programming of the building from an amenities standpoint, to also the programming of the unit, itself. Like, we, in certain prices, we have to have not just a master bath, but a his and her master bath, right? Because that's what their requirements are. So Vince's team is incredibly valuable in helping guide that narrative and communicate that to the project architects and designers.
but also it's like touching upon like just like the shared amenities, like Alara, especially when we're working on a project that has a rental component with a with a for sale multifamily with also a condo component. Most oftentimes when we speak with the brokers and they all agree in agreement between all cities, is that they need separate amenities, one for the rentals and one for the condos. Like there's never a case like that. If there was a case, that there would be like a shared amenity, but then we would also need to carve out spaces that would be a little bit more private and discreet for those buyers, right? That's kind of the draw that we found that's very successful in all of our markets. It's a very same kind of mindset between like New York, Florida, and Texas. So yeah, like, if we have these 40,000 square foot amenities, like that's plenty enough that you could have almost equal amenities for the rentals, for the multifamily, and the condos. But now if you are sharing this one set, then we carefully program with the brokers to say, okay, well, which amenities that we think we can carve out, just that's very private for these exclusive buyers.
I had a
So-
meeting yesterday with a top guy at FlexJets, and I asked him, I've got 9 seats on my plane. Do I ever make those available to your other FlexJets customers? And he said, none of my 300 customers wants to share ever. So you keep using the word sharing, and I'm thinking, I wonder if some of my assumptions about sharing are not true, don't hold true for the ultra wealthy that you're targeting with the
Yeah.
Alara
Well,
and the St.
and I
Regis.
think that goes into, again, especially if you're educating a pool of buyers about the benefits of condominium living. I mean, depending on the demographic, if they're going from a single family home to a condominium, they're doing that because they've had a change in their lifestyle needs, right? And many of my buyers, they're selling that city residence because they already have the country home, plus they have a pied a terre somewhere else in the world. So they're managing multiple properties, and then they're looking to make let's say St. Regis Houston, that their new primary residence, because they no longer need the estate. They no longer want to maintain 2 acres with the gardener and the pool maintenance, and they want simplification. We call it 26 hours in a day, right? You get to see the sunset and the sunrise and sunset. There we go. But we
But
don't
this
have much.
notion of shared amenities, I have a client here, a shared client with Scott, actually. When they go to Florida, they're okay in a shared community with shared amenities. They like to play golf and tennis with the others. But here, they're giving up an $8 million home, and they're not comfortable giving that up for condo. They're really having a tough time with the whole notion of condo or shared walls or
Mhm.
sharing everything. They really value their privacy. And
Then they need a bigger budget.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say
Need to call Scott.
condominiums not for everyone, and we do our best to create amenities that people are going to find valuable. And again, you're getting 40,000 square feet, but you're not having, your HOA is shared with, multiple different people. So that allows for greater services. I mean, I don't hear that much. Most people understand when they're going to a condominium, they're living in a shared building, right? And you have to be okay with that. Not everyone is, and that means they're just never going to be a condo buyer.
Is there a general rule of thumb on a building budget, for example, $100 million building, that 10% of it nowadays, for these, I mean, uber amenitized buildings, that 10% of the budget has to be dedicated towards amenities, or 5%, or what? Is there any sort of general rule of thumb on that?
Vince, what do you think?
No, yeah, I don't think we ever had that kind of discussions with any of the developers to say, like, here is this allotted amount that this percentage should go for this amount of amenities, if I'm answering your question correctly. And also it also depends a lot from location to location too. So no general rule.
What is, when you have a handful of new projects for you guys, what is the biggest differentiator between them? Is it the location? Is it the amenities? Is it the finishes? Is it the service? Is it what are typically, like, if you say, look, we have an opportunity, we're going to bring this to market, and we're against A, B, C, and D. We're going to be E. What do we want to do to be absolutely different from those? What's typically on the priority list?
Yeah, I mean, from the high level list would be the amenity list, because that's easy to find. We can easily provide that data and say, look, here is the amenities that the comps have. This is what we need to provide, X, Y, and Z, right? Well, we can make a bigger lap pool given this, what we're seeing in the market. Like, I think that's what we can track for this. Look, for this buyer demographic, they want to be, maybe they're a little bit more fitness oriented. Then given that kind of feedback from the broker, we'll say, well, we can build a bigger fitness center with more private studios, more gym equipment that basically cater to that. And now, like, if given this new trend, like, the wellness component is such a big thing, like providing them a robust programming, like a robust like wellness programming is a huge thing. And then going down to even the unit level, so like basically finishes and also everything too, right? When they want to, you know, when you're seeing an exact like a difference between like a marble versus a porcelain, that's a very big luxury kind of price point in terms of material, but also the feel and touch and everything. You'll see it. So I think it's all the things, all the above that you said. So from basically from the amenities to the unit level of appliances to the finishes, all of that above basically is all in part of consideration that we feel is that when we do that and equip that to the brokers, they are able to use all of that to say, you know, this is an exciting building that we could sell it to you guys because we have now checked off X, Y, and Z. We have everything, right? And so
But those
that,
those examples you used are common to New York, the Waldorf, the St.
yep.
Regis in Texas, and Alara in Florida. But it occurs to me that, for instance, the question of parking is probably very different in New York versus maybe the Houston market.
Oh
How many
yeah.
spots do
Yeah,
I need?
parking is a
So
must
we
in the non-New York market. It's
and I
such a
want to go
huge.
back to Roberto's comment and to kind of jump in on how Vince was answering. It's all important. I mean, you have to, that's what's so great about planning and design. We don't just look at it from like, okay, let's have great amenities. To get that top of market pricing, and to John, go back to your comment, why are some projects more successful than others? Like, we ask ourselves, who is our buyer? What do they need? How is this going to benefit their life so that they'll get out of their rental, sell their home, and purchase into our condominium? So you can't have great amenities but bad residential interiors. It all has to make sense. You know, wealthy people, all of our, you know, everything that we're building is for the, I think, upper end of the market. I think probably everything that Scott does is the top end of the market. But like, you have to understand what these individuals want, need, and expect. You know, so if you spend all your money on amenities, and then you have no budget for unit interiors, your product's not going to sell. You know, it all has to balance and make sense. And you can't build an A++ building in a C- location. It's not going to work, you know? So that's where it goes back to, from the very beginning, developers come to us, they say, what is your opinion? And we advise them, you know, what is the highest and best use based on the location and probably and the demographic. And to your question about parking, you know, that's another part. Like when we're providing a preliminary unit mix in Texas, we have to outline, okay, one bedrooms at a certain price point get one space, two bedrooms get two, threes get two or three, penthouses get four. But then you also have to plan for, are you adding private garages? You know, you have to factor in storage. Are you doing wine storage? I mean, you know, we have, you know, and there's many cases of that. You know, people, they have $1 million car, like they're not putting that in. They either want an offsite parking for that, like a specialty, you know, they're called like the condo car garages that are popping up everywhere, to or they want that private garage in their unit. And in Texas, they'll spend, you know, 500,000. In New York, probably what, 1 million in some cases, maybe. So,
But
Or
I
a
will say, if
dock.
we go back to New York, though, if there was a big differentiator in terms of amenities, if none of these projects have parking and we were able to build parking, it's a huge plus because obviously, you know, the space is limited. But you know, 565 Broom, that's one of our projects that has parking, right? It's one of the things that people want to buy because there's that level of amenity, especially for New York. But again, it's a lot of goes back to the beginning of making sure that this pre-planning, providing the right data to ensure that we are not overlooking anything that we might miss or whatever, but we want to make sure that, yeah, we have checked off all the list and be able to provide these new opportunities that to attract buyers. So we're very cognizant, and yeah, everything on the list is very important for us to make sure that it's accounted for during the design process.
I want to hear a success story where and you talked about data sets, you talked about analysis.
Yeah.
It's not just that you're in the market every day, but you take a very scientific approach to it. How did your involvement translate into massive success? Because
Sure.
everybody says, oh, yeah, I know how to do that too. But
Yeah.
some of them are just relying on seat of the pants.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, am I able to share screen to kind of be able to kind of walk you through some of the stuff that we did? So I'm going to share, I guess I'll use St. Regis Houston as an example. And Ben, I'm going to share some of the pre-dev that we've kind of
Go
kind
for
of
it.
highlight some of the
Yeah.
data stuff, right? And I think that's a little bit more helpful to walk through some of the people that are listening. And so here's an example of like what data that we provided in the beginning that positioned that project very successfully, right? And so one of our data sets that we collect, and it's a very proprietary database, we have a collection of almost 2,000 more projects in this database, where you can think of it's like a bunch of fact sheets collected together. And so if you have asked me like, hey, what does this project X, Y, and Z have? I can pull that data up for you instantaneously. And that's because like it's my 9 years of building this database together with our colleagues. And that's giving us this kind of like, for one example, this benchmarking study. So one thing is what you're looking here is an amenity survey and and what we're calling an amenity survey and a benchmarking survey, right? And so Sunny, the developer, was asking us, well, what kind of amenities should we provide? Well, we say, Sunny, well, given, this is your comp, right? This is what you're against. Here are the types of amenities, right? And then we also pulled in some outside amenities like Florida because we're doing that at St. Regis. But what's helpful about this is that now that we've collected all this data, we can level this information, right? Now everything is like sorted by like, categories and types. And so you can see that where there's blank spaces, that's kind of like opportunities to discuss like, okay, do we want to offer that as a recommendation, right? That's like one type of the benchmarking services that we provide. And so it was very helpful for both Sunny and the architects that, here, that's our recommendation. We feel that if we go into market with these, it would resonate with the buyers. And that's where they kind of started to account for as they're, taking account when they're building this, designing this 40,000 square foot amenities, right? And then after that, we can go into even more details of like, okay, here is this unit mix that we provided you guys, this recommended unit mix, right? We say, well, we want to see more ones, we want to see more threes or 2 bedrooms, and here are the square foot ranges that we think is going to be very good for the market. But what does that look like in terms of plan? And so we do this kind of like painstaking effort of like, also similarly, instead of looking at amenities, we'll like collect floor plans from each of these competitive buildings that we're looking at, and we're measuring each of those units that we feel are very successful or if it's bad or whatnot. But we collect all that data to tell us, okay, well, given this 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, these are kind of the guidelines, or these kind of design guidelines that you guys need to design to. So for this, what you're seeing here was the unit mix makeup of St. Regis. But then additionally, what is the actual like residential features that the designer architect should design to? Meaning like, okay, well, given this 1 bedroom that's 1,300 square foot, you guys need to have entry closets that have 4 linear feet, right? You need to also have a kitchen that's like this specific linear feet, because that's what we're seeing in the market. That's like, okay, if we are seeing that's in the market, then we should at least in the minimum provide that. But now if we're trying to shoot for this high aspirational pricing, then if there's an opportunity to be above that, then that's where we should kind of see that change or that level of like recommendation, right? And so this is kind of the two sets of level of data that we like to provide, and kind of the level of benchmarking and recommendation we show to our developers and to their architect team to say like, this is now a very clear picture of a guideline that you guys can adhere to. And so that later down the road, we're trying to mitigate those kind of issues where you don't want to do these late plan changes. Like you don't want to come in and say, oh my God, the buyer wants a bigger, living room or a bigger kitchen. No, we already accounted for that because we already looked at the market. We already measured and painstakingly benchmarked the market. So we can tell you, this is where you guys should meet the market at or be above the market at, right? And so, yeah, that's a good example. And to go back to your question, John, like St. Regis was a good example, starting from a ground up. And then, Ben, I don't know how much we can share, but it was very successful when we launched because all this pre-planning process, we actually met the market there. And so,
and to jump in on that, I mean, and we also do extensive floor plan review and commentary. So we're really working with the design team and the developers team to perfect the product as much as possible. And I think, and Vince just spoke, yes, we're very pleased with the success of St. Regis so far. But Vince and myself, along with Forrest Perkins, the interiors team on St. Regis, we collectively designed the sales gallery. And I think something that's so useful is, Vincent, because they're on so many projects, they're designing these sales galleries all throughout the United States. So we're able to understand, okay, what's most impactful? We've got a $250,000 video wall that, people are just, going crazy over. We've got a 10-foot tall model that was shipped from Vancouver. That's literally I'm so proud of it. It's like been my baby, it's like beautiful, but it's just, not something that's really, Texas is still becoming a sophisticated condo market like, Miami or New York City. And so we're bringing in this experience from these other markets and what works well from a sales process. And I think the first thing that we do when we're talking about a sales gallery space is like, okay, what is step 1 through 6? Arrival through closing. What is the client experience like? Just like maybe brokers when they're selling a resale home, you learn, okay, I'm going to start here and I'm going to end here. And you're hitting all of those powerful points. Why should someone buy this product? And that is what, our expertise is.
I want to put a huge compliment to you guys back to that last spreadsheet as to the stuff that you're labeling. Because when a decorator walks into the living room and they go, where do I put a signature piece of art? If you haven't thought of that already, you're dead.
Yeah.
I mean,
Of
it doesn't
course.
work.
People forget about art space.
Yeah.
These individuals, some people have art that's probably worth more than the home,
Scott, I think you brought up a good one of the highlights that a lot of developers and architects overly miss is like the furnishability, right? Because like when we're talking about these ultra high net worth buyers, they have a lot of artwork. So we have to plan for where they want to put their expensive artwork, especially when you're talking about a $40 million penthouse. Like you have to account for those kind of things. It's so important. And then the other things that often is missed is privacy, like the idea of privacy. So for example, like I see oftentimes where a powder room is the doors opening into a living room. That's a big no-no, right? Because you don't want your guests coming out and stuff like that.
Right at a party.
Yeah, exactly. And so there are oftentimes, and we see this a lot in Florida, where it's because it's such a view-driven, locations are very important. And it's also because it's view-driven. So you see this kind of typology where the living room and the primary bedroom is on top of each other, right? Because they're looking at the water view. Now, the problem with that is that to access that primary bedroom is through the living room, right? And so imagine like you're doing your party and stuff like that, and then the moment you open your door to the primary bedroom, it's the bedroom, right? That's a huge no-no, right? So we think about that process because like to alleviate that process, we basically design like a vestibule or foyer. So you're not just opening the door and then seeing the bedroom. No, you're walking in and seeing a nice piece of artwork that's covering the bed, and then you kind of enter graciously into the bedroom chamber, right? And so that's kind of the line of the thing that we think about when we're working with the brokers too, because it's their feedback that's telling us like, well, buyers want to do this and want to do that, and for the most part across the market, privacy, furnishability, and great that Scott that you brought that up. Those are kind of the things that a lot of developers sometimes miss a lot. That we come in and say, you guys need to design that way. Yeah.
If you're dealing with the top end clients, they're sophisticated. They're bringing in their own decorators and their architects.
Absolutely.
And they walk in and stomp their feet and saying, "What idiot did this?"
Yeah, absolutely.
It takes away from the sale. So
absolutely, yeah,
that's great.
And I think, we're also planning for, to Vince's point, like butler's pantries, summer kitchens. You really have to understand how a top of market individual thinks and using the entire team, our broker expertise, our developer client. It's really a collaborative effort. And of course, that's also why Vince and his team will recommend certain interior designers and architects, because they know that they understand that buyer. I think the biggest, mistake a developer can make is not, other than hiring the wrong broker to sell it, is hiring the wrong design team to design it. You have to bring in a team that understands your demographic. And it could be a $500,000. Look, our project Viceroy in Florida, right? That's a different demographic. There's lots of variation, but you've got, I believe, 1-bedrooms that gear toward a younger demographic there, right, Vince? Like,
absolutely.
Or like 500,000 to 700,000, or maybe it's like 700,000 starting.
Yeah. That's a good point that you brought up too. It's like we're also cognizant we came across many requests where a developer asked us for designer recommendations, and we're cognizant of like what it's hard to, first of all, it's hard to equate this designer equals this pricing, but we're cognizant of like where the location is. Like, for example, if you're doing a project in Upper West Side, we're not going to tell you to like, oh, let's do Jean Nouvel, who did 53rd West 53rd, right? We'll say a person like Robert A.M. Stern or Peter Penoyer, that type of architect that's perfect for that level of like, that architecture vernacular in Upper West Side, which is like heavily brick buildings versus tall glass towers, right? So that's kind of, we do think about that, and we do come across those kind of requests, and yeah, that's.
Or if it's a branded residential, obviously a Waldorf, a Ritz-Carlton, a St. Regis is different than a Pendry, a 1 hotel, and an addition. Who are you selling to? And you got to kind of know. And I think what's so great about my team, Vince and DE, is like they understand branded residential so much. I mean, Douglas Elliman, we happen to be very strong in that, and the brands come to us because they know that we understand their brand guidelines, their styling guidelines, and just that different type of consumer that resonates. It becomes part of their identity, especially if you're attaching a hospitality flag to it.
I noticed most of the amenities in one St. Regis Miami translated to the St. Regis in Houston. And so I can see that that's part of their brand identity, is that we have more of the amenities you expect to see, and if you love us in Miami, you'll love us in Houston.
Well, it's funny, many people in Houston that will also own in Miami. So they buy multiple properties in these similar flags. And, if you're a Marriott, consumer, you want the Marriott points. And so you're kind of maybe sticking to certain brands, or, if you're a Waldorf buyer, under Hilton, you're kind of staying under the Hilton flags. But do want to say another service that is incredibly important is our model home service that Vince's team does. So, and I think that comes as to if you're doing a takeover, or obviously, not all projects sell out before completion. So bringing in these 8,100 designers, and obviously, I think everyone, if you're in New York, you've seen 53 West 53rd, and some of these amazing buildings, that are so beautifully done, and it gets incredible press. And so Vince's team is instrumentally valuable in helping put together that programming to sell products in a completed building.
It's one of our probably most successful marketing strategies and tools that we're seeing that's very resonates with buyers, because 10 years back people were able to buy the unit from floor plans, right? But nowadays we're seeing a lot of buyers that they need to come in and see a space. So a lot of times, like, we can come in and say like, okay, well, we can model the space for you. Here's a designer that we feel like can really resonate with the building and also with the buyers. And so that has become a very crucial marketing strategy that we've done through all of our projects, right? Because just now these sophisticated buyers, they just need to come in and it's hard for them to visualize the space. And so it's just to see a fit out of like, this is how you can live and so forth. It really helps the buyer just cross that finish line.
Well, this has been an incredible show. I've learned so much. I thought that I could stand on Billionaires Row and say, well, if this worked, why don't we just do it again here and it'll work again? And what I'm learning is it's very specifically targeted through your spreadsheets and your database. And what works in New York doesn't necessarily work in other places. And what works in New York doesn't necessarily work across the street in New York. Incredible.
What works in Manhattan doesn't necessarily work in Brooklyn.
Right.
Yeah.
And that you need not only the data, but the team with experience. And while they don't take over for a name brand architect and a fabulous interior decorator, I think in order to translate some of those fantastic design visions into something that pencils out in the market, you've got to have a team like this that works very closely together with your agent. So, wow, awesome show. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You're going to find this show at boroughsandburbs.com. You'll find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube in about 15 minutes. I want to thank our sponsor, gracefarms.org, and you can buy some of the Grace Farms tea, and coffee at their website and check out their event calendar coming up. I want to thank my co-host, Roberto Cabrera. This is robertocabrera.com is where you're going to find his latest newsletter. This is how I found him. This is how I know he's a genius. Everybody should go to robertocabrera.com and check out his newsletter. This is theengelteam.com, and that's me, the guy in the bow tie. So you can find me here at theengelteam.com. I want to thank Benjamin Watson, Vice President, Real Estate Development Expert for Elliman, and you're in Houston.
Houston.
And I want to thank Vincent. Thank you, Vincent. You're in New York?
New York. Yep.
All right. Center of the known universe. But you're also working with teams in Florida, New York, Texas, and LA?
Yep, that's correct.
All right. Thank you so much, Vince. Thank you, Benjamin.
You guys.
Hey guys,
Great
great to
show.
be on.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having us.
Yep.
Nice
Thank
to meet
you,
you,
Scott
Scott.
Hobbs, for your help. Always a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Scott.
Enjoy, guys. Always have fun. Thanks.